So now it will be interesting to see how things are starting to look like. Yes, from what I can gather, we are live. And this picture, yes, it is out there. Very good. Right, at this point, to the ones out there, can you hear me, Saku, speaking at this point? Just to double check at this point. We've got a few viewers at this point.
I can hear you well, Saku, this is Sana.
Very good, but I'm checking now the YouTube streaming. Right, checking again. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you clearly.
Very good, Anna. I'm just checking the viewers. Let's see. I should be hearing myself.
I don't know if you hear yourself, but I keep hearing you.
Very good. Yes. Being confirmed that yes, people can hear us. Very good. Thank you. I have to admit, this was the most nerve-wracking point.
You're doing just fine.
Right. So we've got another 6 minutes before we start, so we'll keep the lines open and start chatting at 9 o'clock as promised. There's some echo. That's actually me. That's a very good point. How about now? Now there should be my voice coming via Skype only. I had basically my laptop mic and Skype mic open. Can you hear me, Kirsi?
Should the rest of us check our audio as well, Saku?
Still the echo. Now the question is, Kirsi, is it troublesome echo? Because
From this end, I can't hear any echo, so sounds clear.
I'm realizing these sounds must come from my end, to be honest with you. Which is, I'm now realizing what's causing it. The trouble is, I'm not sure if I can avoid it. There are no. Let's see. Two mics shouldn't be open, frankly speaking. Headphones, yeah. Tell me about it. Very good. Let's see. Yep, realizing this one. Bear me a second. I think I managed to get the hang of it. Yes, I so agree. And that the idea is not to use the speakers. Right. Now a new test. How does this sound like? Yeah, it seems that we cannot escape that. I agree. I just put on the headphones. Yeah, I think we need to come up with this semi-perfect solution. Apologies for this.
Is the echo only when Saku is speaking, or also if I'm speaking now? This is Caroline now talking.
Yes, I could. I tried to play with the headphones and listening to the actual YouTube stream, but at the same time I could realize that it is coming about 10 seconds after what we discussed. So yes, let's proceed by allowing Caroline to take over. I think this is the best way forward at this stage.
Although it seems there's the same echo for me, so okay. So we still go ahead.
Yes, I gave it a listen, and the echo is it's a little bit annoying. It's not disturbing, but it's a little bit annoying. So live and learn. We will run better checks beforehand next time. I was pretty certain we're safe with this one, but here we are, almost good, and I think it's time to proceed, just to make sure that we get through this in the timing as planned. So welcome to this session on hiring and recruiting international junior talent. The second webinar and the first webinar run from remote locations, so none of us are in the same location, which has provided a great opportunity for myself to jump on a learning curve. I did not did not realize that existed. Very pleased to introduce our guests, Caroline from Kone, Anna from F Secure, and Austin from Swahili. Do you want to take over, Caro, and further introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Saku. And thank you for the opportunity for speaking today. So good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline, and today I'm going to give you my perspective on the topic of hiring international junior talent in Finland. And I'll be sharing also more general tips as well for those who are looking for a job and may not be junior talents anymore. So I'll try to keep it in that sense generic enough. Saku, just one practical thing, I cannot see the presentation now, so if you can move to the next slide, as I'm more able to see your OBS studio screen. Yeah, there you go, thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah, so first let me spend a little bit of time on my journey so that you can get a little bit of context. So because I was also at some point a junior international talent in Finland. And my Finnish journey actually started in France. So my university was having a one-year exchange opportunity with a Finnish university. So I came in 2003. and I never left. So I ended up doing a Bachelor of Business Administration at Hämeen Ammattikorkeakoulu in Valkeakoski, which is a small town close to Tampere. And after that, I got a small job at the university. And then I hit a roadblock. So basically between January and September 2006, I was either employed or working for a company that was a bit like fake company somehow, it turned out, and ended up going bust. So I lost some months of salaries and was going through the sort of unemployment hoops and loops. And although altogether, let's say 9 months is considered by some a short time, it felt very long at the time. I must have sent some 100+ CVs and called God knows how many companies, but in the Tampere region in those days it was very difficult. I believe it's anywhere, but even back then it was even worse. And out of all these recruitment attempts, I ended up getting one interview, only one, with a company called CTEC, but I nailed it and I got the job. It was a 3-month contract about something that had nothing to do with my studies, but well, you know, I had to put food on the table, so I took it. And in the end, it was a really good experience, and that was followed by many other small contracts. But eventually, I did manage to get a permanent contract there. Even got an upgrade and changed the job, and I ended up staying 5 years. Even though at the beginning it was more of a, let's say, you know, getting a paycheck type of a job, but it turned out to be a very good experience. And then in the meantime, I started also my MBA part-time studies with Haga area and moved to Helsinki because I thought that, okay, I don't have many long job prospects as an international person in Tampere, so maybe in Helsinki I'll have better luck. I did send one application as a test, just thinking that, okay, let's see how things work in Helsinki, and I did send one application only to Kone. I called them, I got an interview, and the recruitment process lasted something like 6 months, which was very long, but in the end we were something like 100 applicants, and I got the job. So that was an interesting experience. And since I've been in the company now almost 9 years, I've had many different positions, and currently I'm leading one of the process development streams there for one of the business lines. I have recruited international talents as well, so I'm going to be talking about my own tips as someone who had to apply a job when I was a junior talent here in Finland, but also I will be giving tips as a hiring manager. And I just want to give a quick shout out to some of my colleagues who have been also helping me with this presentation. So I've been asking both international junior talents, but also hiring managers to contribute and give their viewpoints as well. And lastly, I just want to mention quickly that I'm quite actively volunteering as well in Finland, which I think is a great way to integrate to Finnish society and also to network with people, but we'll come back to that later. I'm going to talk now about Kone, just a little bit, very briefly. If, we can move forward. So basically, Kone has been in business for more than a century, and as you can see from the picture, at the start of the journey, it was a small company, but it was also 100% a Finnish company. But then today, if we move forward, the company is quite different. So we are a global leader in elevator and escalator industry. We have approximately 60,000 employees, 500,000 customers. We've been very rapidly growing in the last decade, though we are a century old, and we've doubled up our net sales, for instance, in the last 10 years, reaching about now 10 billion. We've got 149 nationalities working for us around the world, though we are actually having only maybe some 60, 70 countries, I think, so we are quite diverse in that sense. And maybe as a fun fact, we are moving over 1 billion people per day. Of course, in those coronavirus time, that number is probably not correct, but in normal times we are having like quite heavy operations. And then if I'm looking for a little bit more specifically about Finland and international talents in Kone in Finland, so we have about 10% of our staff based in Finland is of foreign nationality, which I actually believe is a pretty high number. So 1 in 10 employees is of foreign nationality. So I think that's quite uncommon in that sense. And at the moment in Finland, we have about 50 different nationalities. The makeup of that is about 45% from Europe, 40% from Asia, and then the rest from the rest of the world. So it's quite mixed. So it's not only Europeans, even though the company is headquartered in Europe. We've got about 20% of those people are under 30, and 35% of them were under 30 when they started. So we do have a pretty good pool of junior international talents, and also junior international talents that are staying in the company and making longer career, like I did, for instance. We've got a pretty good female to male ratio in the international talents, which relatively the same than if we are looking at the Finnish staff. And most of our international talents are university graduates. And I would say, I don't have the statistics exactly on the degrees, but I think the majority of them are having a master's degree. And a lot of them also have master's degrees from Finnish university or University of Applied Sciences. One of the best ways to get the foot in the door of any big company is usually through a training program, and this is something that at Kone we are taking very seriously. So we actually have 2 programs which I wanted to discuss very briefly today. If Saku can move forward. Thank you. The first one is the International Training Program, which we have had since 1983, actually, and it welcomes junior talents who have completed 50% or more of their studies. And the requirement basically is that you have to do that traineeship outside of your home country. So basically, like if you're a foreigner and you're already in Finland, then you would qualify for this program because you're not a Finnish citizen. So even though you're in Finland already, you can apply for Finnish International Training Program in Kone. It's a very competitive program, so we take about 15 people each year worldwide. I think there's something like 10 in Finland, and we have had up to 3,000 candidates, like this year, for instance. So it's very tough to get into, but it's a really, really good program. And as I mentioned, I've been asking some of my friends from Kone to give some insights for today. And for instance, they don't represent all the trainees that we have had, but there was a pretty good sample of them. And about 60%, so 2/3, actually started in Kone through this program. So it's a very good track type of program to then get a full-time employment in the company. And then we have the second program, which is the summer training program in Finland. So this one is also qualifying for foreigners, so you don't have to be Finnish. We take about 100 people also in Finland each year. So this one is a little bit easier maybe to get in, but same thing, it's then gives a pretty good track for them getting permanent employment in the company. And again, this is for Finns and non-Finns as well. And if you're studying at the moment and you're interested in those programs, then you can learn more from our kone.com website, or if you will be recently graduating. And our next application round will be in January next year. So this is maybe a bit more addressed to those who are finishing up the studies now this year, or who will be graduating somewhere next year. But very good programs, and I really highly recommend them. Then I want to give some tips about recruitment, and this is more like my view. I don't have the universal truth, and this is not representing in that sense Kone's view, but having been now something like 15 years working in Finland and recruiting quite a few people, including international talents, I felt that maybe I can give some insights. So the first thing very briefly, because we can never repeat it enough, is that it's estimated by some at least that up to 80% of the jobs fulfilled in Finland are on the hidden market. So it's key to network. And I think that it's very important to start networking from school if you're studying in Finland, and join groups on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or associations, or talent accelerators, or whichever else. And I made that mistake. I didn't do anything about networking during my study time. I wasn't even sure if I was going to stay in Finland or not, so I didn't really see it as a priority. And during those 9 months or so of rocky patch and employment type of period, I didn't even put any effort into that. I didn't know anything about networking in Finland. Nobody told me anything, so I was like completely clueless, and I think that was a huge mistake. And I really recommend to anyone who is either unemployed or studying at the moment, like really try to work on your network. I think one of the key points also is to dare to ask. So of course you can join some of the groups or things that I'm listing here, for instance, but these days I think people are quite open in Finland in a sense that you can actually connect with people who are either branding themselves in a certain field or have a special interest in a domain, something that is close to your heart or close to your studies. And I think at the same time, you have to approach them in a smart way, right? You have to build the rapport, and that's a bit difficult because we don't necessarily get the one-on-one handbook how to do networking. So I think one of the mistakes that I see coming through my LinkedIn, at least very often, is that people want to connect, and then the first thing that they do is like sending me resumes or asking for a job or internship or mentoring or something, and they are automatically asking, they say, oh, hey, here's my CV, and do you have a job? I think that in big corporations, at least like Koname, it's very clear that we have recruitment processes, and you can't just like send an application to someone that you connected with on LinkedIn. But regardless, you may be surprised, but this happens actually quite a lot. So I think maybe better approach, like I said, is finding people that have a common interest with you, or they can be thought leaders or things like that, and then approach them in a maybe more subtle way and start to build discussions around that topic of interest, or ask for book recommendations or things like that, or ask just for a coffee, or try to go more from that angle than the sort of the job angle. And it's good to network anyway with people that are also from companies that you may not be interested in, because then you may discover new horizon and things like that. So I just put a few now in this presentation that can be somewhat tips if you don't really know where to start. But I think there is also a lot of crowdsourcing on the internet about networking in Finland. So definitely I encourage you to do that as top priority. But then if you start to be in a mode where you're either preparing for applications or you're already in this kind of application processes, then I'm going to be repeating a lot of the things that you have already heard, but there is a reason for that. The reason why I keep repeating these kind of tips is because, unfortunately, in my position, I've roughly processed 400 to 500 applications since I joined Kone, and about 90% at least are still not up to the part. They're just not, it's not what we are expecting as hiring managers, and that I think is a big challenge. I think one of the top priorities really is to have a top-notch LinkedIn profile. So when I was looking for jobs, 15 years ago, that LinkedIn didn't have really any role in the recruitment process, but now I think that things have completely changed. And it's very important tool for recruiters and hiring manager, because it gives so much more insights than the CV and the cover letter. My LinkedIn profile is not good, by the way, so don't take that as an example. I'm not particularly working on it that much. But studies or you have this kind of international working experience, it doesn't really help us as hiring managers to learn that much about you. So it's good that you put some type of explanations about what you have done, what you have learned, and how it can contribute to your future career, and not just this kind of like listing of what you've done. And then again, be active, follow the right people, like posts, write articles, participate or create podcasts, join groups, brand yourself, try to be very active there. Then about researching the right companies, I think that's really key. So I understand again that we have to put food on the table. I was there as well, so we may not have the luxury to choose the companies that we want to work for. However, if there are some companies that are really in your target state for where you want to work, it's very important that you're very proactive and that you're not waiting for the jobs to be posted, but attend events, try to meet them at conferences if they have a stand, network with the key employees for your field. Again, going through this LinkedIn and asking questions and showing interest about the company never hurts. Learn about the vision, the value, market condition, financial reports, whatever is available about that company. And generally speaking, I think if you're still in school, it's quite good also to make assignments about these companies. So I've had people interviewing for me that they were really showing interest for the company for a long time, and they were presenting some of the findings they had from their assignments. So then you kind of feel as a recruiter that, okay, that person has genuinely been interested in our company for a while and already has some insights and things like that. So that can make a big difference, I think. Then if you're applying for a specific job, so something that's been open, this is valid even more so. So if you have established a network or you're building now your network, you can refer to that network to get insider's advice. And again, I would never ask for like a reference or support for getting the job, but rather tips and tricks that can help you then to succeed with the application. Then about the CV, so on one single opening, I've gotten up to 120 applications for one single job. And that was actually for this international trainee program. So everybody was foreigner. So we couldn't pick a Finnish person. So the competition in that sense was open to everyone. And it was overall like quite poor. So in that sense that the CVs were not looking good. The contents were not good, the cover letters were terrible, and we had actually very few applications that were worthy. So in my humble opinion, and I know that hiring managers may disagree, but the looks are just as important as the content. So you imagine I have 120 CVs in front of me. I'm not going to read all of them. So those who can catch the eye, of course, are a huge advantage. And I think there is free tools these days like Canva, for instance, that can really give you opportunity to make nice looking CVs that catch the eye. And for instance, one tip I can give you, because I thought it was a nice touch, is that one of the applicants, thanks to this kind of tool, had been branding the CV theme color to the company's brand colors. And right away you see that, okay, this person has put some effort, they have put the Kone colors. So of course it caught my eye out of this sea of white CVs that were out there. So I think that's a nice touch. And then otherwise, usual advice, make it comprehensible. I personally prefer the one-pagers than multiple pages, but that can be debated, of course. And if you've got a foreign degree, use some comprehensive name. So meaning that if you have done a 4-year degree from university, it's okay to call it a bachelor in the CV. Like we can talk about the detail of what exactly that degree was in the interview or whatever, but keep it simple also in your LinkedIn and in your CVs, that people can understand what kind of degree you've been getting. Also, if the university is foreign, it's good to put some ranking, because as hiring managers in Finland, we don't know what your university is worth. So if it's good university, you can mention it in the CV. Add your GPA as well, that cannot hurt. And I would say that if you have been, I've been seeing a lot of candidates, especially foreign candidates, that are reluctant to put cleaning jobs, gardening jobs, restaurant jobs, and whatever in their CV. I actually think that you should put them and ask recommendations from those bosses, because from all the jobs you can learn something and you can turn it into something positive, like service mindset, thoroughness, coordination, whatever it is, can be very useful. So never be ashamed of any jobs that you've had. And I've discovered in interviews actually that people had a lot more experience than I thought from the CVs, because they didn't want to talk about the cleaning jobs and stuff. But that means, you can follow directions, you are hardworking, and all kind of other qualities which we can deduct from that. And then, of course, don't be scared of videos. So these days there is more and more video coming our way. And then lastly, about the cover letter. Cover letters for me are always a big challenge because I get very few good ones. I think as hiring managers, we can see from the first sentence when it's copy-pasted. So that's the first thing. So we just know it, and it doesn't make it look good. So customize is very important. And one structure that I really like, and I don't see very often, is the you, me, and us structure. So talking first about the company, why the company inspires you, and what motivates you about the company, not even the job necessarily, but the company. Then how you fit to the job, but don't repeat the same thing than in the CV. Refer more to this kind of job description type of things, or job requirements. And this is a lot about the future also, not so much the past. We can read the past from the CV. And then the us part, which is then how you position yourself in the company. So I'm confident if given the chance together, we can, change the world. So that I think is a good structure to have. Then call, of course. That's also something that surprises me, that I get so many applications, but I get so few calls. And I think the call is super important. I will practically never interview someone that hasn't called. So this is just for me basic principle, that you call, you introduce yourself, you ask questions about the role, you ask questions about the recruitment process, prepare an elevator speech, and try to differentiate a bit from the CV and the cover letter, but find some kind of hooks that the person you're calling, they will remember that, oh yeah, that was the one that was from this country, or has done that type of degree, or has that type of experience. So not repeating everything from your CV, but a couple of hints and things that then people can remember. And the elevator pitch is super important because you can also use it in conferences or other places where you meet people. And if there's no number, then try to find the contact from LinkedIn or by email. I mean, most of the time, if you have the first name, last name, you can pretty much deduce the email address from the companies. You can find those, at kone.com would be usually the kind of email addresses which are pretty easy to deduce. So you should be in any case having some type of a contact after you're sending the application. And then last but not least, if you do get the interview, congratulations, 90% of the job is done in that sense. So in this one, I would say that, again, show a lot of enthusiasm for the company, not even just for the job, but for the company in general, and really relate to the values or the mission or something that has really to do with you. Talk a lot about who you are as a person, not only what you have done. That tends to be, unfortunately, the case. We go back to this laundry list of I've done this, and that, and the other thing. It's more I care about who you are as a person, not only what you've done. Sell your difference. This is all about getting the competitive advantage. So I put here some silly list of elements of differentiation, but you have to create your own narrative, and you have to create ways that you're selling a story that nobody else is selling. I'll give you an example. I had a recruitment for this, like I said, 120 applicants for one job. And in the end, this young lady that got the position, she had been already doing assignments in schools about Kone. She knew quite well. She had studied very hard about the company. She knew in and out the strategy. She was able to give some inputs. And as she was Chinese, though the job had nothing to do with China, what I was offering, she was projecting herself and saying that with her European culture, understanding of the company, and her Chinese skills, then in the future she would be an asset for the company, and she could be supporting with developing our operations in China, for instance. And well, nobody else was offering that of all these other candidates. So just really projecting into the job and projecting into the company. So I think that's, you really have to find this kind of package. It's almost like service design. You have to define yourself in a way that you are different. You're different and it's good. And that difference is then something that you need to be able to sell. And it's not always about just the nationality or the language, though that can help. But it can be also that, you're serious about staying in Finland, you're on the track to get your residency or things like that, you're learning the language. These kind of things also, I think, can make a big difference. And finally, my last advice before I must give the mic to my friends is that it is difficult to find a job in Finland. Very difficult, but it's also not impossible. So I would really advise you to be persistent. And again, if you're a junior international talent, try to find all the assets and all the resources available for you to help you to succeed and build your network. That is one of the most important things here. So that's for what I wanted to share.
Wonderful.
Saku, I don't know if you got some questions or
can you hear me?
Or you want to move forward?
Very good.
I hope somebody was able to hear me at least for a while.
Oh yes, definitely. Oh my.
Hello.
Hello, Caroline. I can hear you, and I guess that Saku is taking the lead now.
Okay, great. And if we are not able to get Saku, I think that you will go next then, Anna.
Yes, I'll go next. However, there is... yeah, the slides are not there, so let's give Saku a couple of minutes at least to come back to us with further instructions.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? This is peculiar. It really did cut me out. This is quite something. You are all good. I am. We got rid of the mic by disconnect.
All right, it seems that we have some technical problems, but Saku is our wizard and he's fixing that now. Let's wait for a little while.
Yeah, and in the meantime, then for our audience, feel free to connect on LinkedIn. Maybe don't approach me all with the private messages to do the networking. So a little bit of a joke here too, whilst we're having those technical challenges. But yeah, of course, always happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. But again, I encourage you to find people from your field that are available. And I think that Saku is available on YouTube. And Anna will be next as soon as we have her slides up and running.
Yes, but well, Saku, I guess that you can hear me. My slides are not there, but it's okay. I can move forward already. Can you hear me? Yeah, all good. Perfect. So, welcome everybody. My name is Ana Calles and I work for F-Secure. I'm gonna give a brief introduction about myself I am, originally Spanish, living in Finland since 2012, but also lived here during 2002 and 2004. My experience is all in HR, or People Operations and Culture, as we call it in F-Secure, but my degree is as a biologist, which is quite different. I have worked for Kone for 8 years. Then I moved into high tech, so worked in a company called Applied Materials, US organization, for about 5 years. Then I came back to a more traditional business with Fiskars. And last, I am working in F-Secure for the last 2.5 years, more or less. You can see my LinkedIn details. So if you want to find me in LinkedIn, just type Ana Teresa Calles and you will find me. So I don't know if you can see my my slides, but I wanted to give you a bit of flavor of what's F-Secure. And we are changing totally scenario from Kone manufacturing organization to F-Secure, that is actually cyber security. Why do we exist? It's just to build trust in society and to keep people safe. Then what are the mega trends that are supporting our strategy? You see it all around us. So there are cyber attacks. There are regulatory processes. For instance, banks, they must have cybersecurity cover as part of their legal compliance. Geopolitics, we all know what happened with Russian companies like Kaspersky, for instance. Cloudification, all the businesses, all the systems are moving to the cloud, and digitalization. So that's why we need an integrated offering. So how to protect ourselves and how to defend ourselves as well. So in super brief, who we are. Most of the organization is in Europe, around 80, exactly 78%. The rest is in the US, 9%, and others. So Asia and Africa is 13%. Most of our business is consumer business, so the classical antivirus that you have at your home, but slightly more than half is consultant and business security. So it's all that has to do with protecting businesses and consulting organizations, in which we test how are their systems working and how can they protect and defend themselves. Imagine, for instance, Finnair, they must have a system to ensure that no hackers can get into their systems. So that's what we do. We send our hackers to test their systems, and then we propose solutions to cover themselves. From gender equality, for instance, and this is very unique for us, our distribution is 15% of our employees are women, which is quite low, but is well above the average. The average company in high tech is 10%. And for instance, in our major R&D organization, in the management team, which I belong to, 50% of us are women, and this is very, very unique. We are trusted by companies ranging from Fortune's 500 to small businesses. So the rating of the organization is really good. And we continue to provide, of course, the best and more consistent protection. So, all these IB tests that are going around, and how we marketing not just our service, but how well we are protecting the customers. So we rank steadily in the number one. So our competitors are, for instance, Symantec, Bitdefender, Kaspersky, Trend Micro, McAfee, Microsoft, etc. Saku, I cannot still see the slides, so just for your information. So what is very interesting is to understand how we protect the customers and what type of customers we have. So one is the industrial business, so from paper mills to power generation. Clients in the batch and process industries, as well as utilities, trust our cybersecurity specialists. Another area that we have is transportation and aviation. So we fully assess the security of entire access control implementations for clients. So you ensure the resilience against cloning, tampering, emulation, and even simple channel attack resistance. And we also have protection, specific protection for finance and banking, and this is one of our major business scenarios. And of course, utility and energy distribution. So in this last one, for instance, we support major utilities company with secure transition to a cloud environment. So we use a risk-based approach to identify attack vectors, effective mitigation, etc., etc. And of course, the view is to provide a holistic, simple, and simplest user experience also for end customers. And this is very important. And why I wanted to tell you about what do we do in the company is because most of the people, if they have heard about F-Secure, is okay, this is just antivirus. No, it's just much more than this. For instance, now IoT, Internet of Things, has become a mega trend, and so is protected homes. So if you think that you have smart TV, smart fridges, smart webcams, and actually, as Mikko Hyppinen always say, they are not very smart, so you can be hacked easily through those systems. So the view of antiviruses is much more holistic, is to protect the whole user life from cyber attacks. Then moving into the specific topics of recruiting international talent, as you may guess, for all the above, our recruitment processes and systems and trends in F-Secure are quite different from what you can see in companies as Kone or what I have experienced from previous employers. For instance, in F-Secure, in our Finnish headquarters, we have 50 nationalities, and we have about 600 employees. This can tell you already about the diversity of the organization. So if we place F-Secure in the world map, we have 13 offices in 17 countries. It's about 1,700 fellows globally. We call employees fellows. So just for your information, if you hear this word, don't get too shocked. So 1,700 fellows globally, around 700 in Finland, based in Helsinki and Oulu. We have globally 70 nationalities, and as I mentioned, 50 nationalities only in Finland. So if you go and walk by our headquarters in Helsinki, you hardly hear any Finnish. And this is very, very unique. And of course, it drives the way we lead our performance and our recruitment process. What do we value so much international talent? Well, we have a different set of skills, different approach and points of view, and this equals diversity. This is about international mindset and experience. It's about growing our global talent pool. It's also employer brand, and it's very critical. It's about understand customer needs globally also. But how do we do to attract international talent? And you may think like, well, we are all here, young international talent looking for a job, but I want to give you a message of hope as well. It's not easy to hand you all. So we companies put a lot of effort on attracting international talent. So how do we do that? We participate in many forums as this to show how we are as an attractive employer. We have a referral system in F-Secure. So if a fellow refers a candidate for any of the jobs that we have and the person is finally hired, the person gets a bonus. We participate in many local job boards. We participate in Facebook groups for expats. The job ads are written in the local language, but primarily, for instance, for Finland, is written in English because I would say 99% of our jobs, they don't require Finnish. Unless, for instance, you are working specifically only with Finnish customers, but in this type of organizations, this may happen if you, for instance, work for marketing and you have to target Finnish customers. Otherwise, you don't use Finnish language at all. We also cooperate a lot with local university. For instance, we have one division that is called the Artificial Intelligence Center of Expertise, and we work a lot with the universities in Finland to attract talent that start with us in cooperation projects, and some of them, they end up hired by us. And of course, we have internships and Erasmus programs. Why to join a company like F-Secure? Well, cybersecurity is probably one of the coolest sectors right now. So it's about keeping the world a safe place. It's about the purpose, but it's also about the mega trend that I'm always mentioning. Cybersecurity is one of the areas that is growing and that is here to stay. And it's a truly global business. And you have to be small enough to be agile, but big enough to lean on. We need to have the best, and the best means the best. So it's amazing to work with the amount of talents that you work with. You have the best experts in the industry, and the industry is very hot. It's a very dynamic and informal culture, and you're encouraged to be yourself. I have directors in the company that are fully tattooed. We don't care about your looks. You can go with your rastas. It's not important because our business is very, very different. We are quite out of the traditional business structure. As I mentioned, diverse culture, fast-growing company, and we have a very good reputation. And in this type of companies, you have the possibility to make an impact. Not to mention that, of course, the possibility of having a challenging and interesting work, an international career. And one critical thing that is flexibility. We are a very flexible company. For instance, now with the coronavirus, jumping into a remote mode has been very easy for the whole organization. And we like to have fun. We are serious, our job is serious, but we aren't. So I guess that from now that I have raised your interest, I can tell you what are we constantly looking for. So of course, R&D profiles. Majority of our job openings are related to R&D in different areas. So main skills can be Java, Linux, Python, full stacks, Linux developers, software engineers, threat analysts, security consultants, but we have also sales and marketing positions opened. Very important, summer jobs, trainees. Unfortunately, this is now too late because all the companies in Finland, we start recruiting the summer trainees earlier in the year. So now all the summer job and trainees positions are closed, but we recruit several of them every year, and they often continue part-time and eventually become permanent employees. We have traineeships every once in a while, and we advertise them separately. Then this is all for what we can call young graduates, but we also, of course, recruit more experienced people, and in all them we require value and ability to adapt to change. But regardless of the experience level, we want people who share our values of fellowship, and those are trust, integrity, commitment, and excellence, and you can see all them in our web page. What are the main criteria for our applicants? Once that you have the hard skills, you fulfill the requirements of the job. What we request is the ability to take ownership, to see the big picture. Of course, suitable background, an ambition to learn and develop, excellent English language, and punctually also local language skills. Good interpersonal skills, courage to challenge the status quo, entrepreneurial spirit, proactive and hands-on working style, flexibility and innovation, those are very important, and integrity. How is our talent acquisition process? All the jobs, all of them are published outside. So the main sources where you can find our jobs are LinkedIn, Dunitori and our own career page. In our organization, the hiring manager always pre-selects the candidates, and the first interview is conducted with the hiring manager. Then there are more interviews with the colleagues and potential partners. We don't do typically tests. We trust a lot on our interview process. Minimum that amount of interviews is 3. The last of them is with the people operations or HR person. And then from that, the employee gets a job offer. And in our case, they tend to be quite fast. So we have completed interview recruitment processes in less than a month from publishing to recruiting. You can find in our career site more information as well as all the job openings that we may have. If I would jump into what would be my personal advice for international talent in Finland, very important. Looking for a job is a job itself. So it's hard work and you need to put effort into that. You need to market in yourself, build an attractive CV and LinkedIn profile, but also keep it personal and be yourself. And write an appealing presentation letter, as Caroline says. And very important is to adapt it to the specific position of the company. So you read the requirements of the job, highlight in your profile how do you meet the requirements. Make it resonant with the company. You shouldn't apply with the same CV to a startup than to a mature company as Barsila or Kone, for instance. So dig into the company, check what are the values, and check how can you advertise yourself, not only from a hard skill, but also from a soft side, how your personality can meet, what can you bring to the table. Yes, in Finland, speaking Finnish is important, but there are companies and positions that doesn't require speaking Finnish. So the more international the role, the more international the company, the higher the chances that Finnish is not required. And this is very important. So typically when they say Finnish is required, don't even bother to apply because it means professional Finnish. So unless you know the language well, you are then spending a lot of time that are for applications that won't succeed. So focus on those ones in which you can have a good chance to enter. As Carolina stated, network. Build and maintain connections and networks. Be active in forums, in organizations, in groups. Very important. Turn no thank yous into opportunity to develop. So if you have been on a, for instance, recruitment process and you receive a no thank you email, just reply politely. Can you please give me some feedback about my application didn't succeed, as it will help me to build a more solid profile or develop my skills to be more successful should future cases arise. So try to get some feedback about why weren't you selected, as it will help you fine-tune your application for future process. Very important, keep updated in your area of expertise. Continue training yourself in areas that complement your CV. And you can see easily what you may be lacking in when you read the advertisements. So check what you are missing and try to find sources. Actually, there are tons of free training options out there in the internet. And a very practical and important tip, create a job set in LinkedIn so you will get in your inbox all the job openings are available. And this is mostly all from my side. Any questions, somebody?
Let's...
Okay, I could see that now the slides were there.
Yes.
So I will take this as a no. So Saku, the floor is yours.
Let's proceed with Austin, and I'll talk through some of the questions after Austin's presentation.
All right. Well, my name is Austin Sears. Maybe I can go next, as I'm kind of next up here after Anna. I can see that Saku has at least put the slides on our end. I don't see them on the YouTube stream yet, but I know that there's also a delay. But in terms of my presentation here today, so you've already heard Carlina talk a bit about Kone, Anna talk a bit more about how things work at F-Secure, and I'm here to kind of give you a different spin on things as someone who works in recruitment in kind of the startup scene and things like that. So the things we'll talk about today, I think the biggest thing that I can offer to any of you is really kind of some notes about my own experience. So I'll tell you a bit about me. I'll tell you a bit more about how we approach hiring at Swappy, with the disclaimer that this is still a work in progress. This is something that I was hired to do earlier this year. And then I'll tell you a bit more about what it's like to work in a startup versus a large company. And then we'll end with some additional tips for job seekers. But if I'm honest, a lot of things have already been covered by both of the previous speakers as well. But if we jump into a bit about me, so as you probably guessed, I'm also not Finnish. I moved to Finland in 2013, a pretty radical move to move from Chicago, which is where I grew up and lived for my entire life before moving here. And basically I moved here to do my master's in sociology at University of Helsinki. And now at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, well, how did someone who studied sociology kind of turn that into a career in talent acquisition and HR? But if we move to the next slide, I'll happily tell you a bit more about that. So if I'm really honest, I ended up working in tech and in startups by accident. I was studying at University of Helsinki. The program that I studied in was focused on ethnic relations research, and a lot of my former students that I studied with now work in places like Migri or kind of other Finnish international companies, or even for EU Parliament. Whereas I was not able to do those things because I don't speak Finnish fluently, or any other EU language for that matter other than English. And if I highlight a bit more about my experience, I even struggled trying to find a traineeship placement at University of Helsinki, even when I'd received a grant to do so. So, since 2013, I've seen how the job market has changed a lot here, and has become more international, but I would say it is not easy. So all of you who have been commenting today, I really appreciate your active participation, and I understand your frustration. I'm here to talk about my experience, so I know each person has their own as well, and different struggles depending on industry and things like that. But I also started working at Fafas while I was studying. It's not something that I ever wanted to do long term in my career, but it's something that I did to support myself. And I also knew that in order to kind of find a new way to support myself and put food on the table rather than, thinking about my long-term career, I needed to send a lot of applications. So I sent over 150 applications, different jobs, traineeship programs throughout Finland and also abroad. And I think that experience really helped me to hone the message that I was trying to convey, which was that, I have this specific research experience. I'm happy to leverage that, but I just need an opportunity to do so. So that actually ended up with me being hired at Volt as a trainee. So I was hired to work on HR and recruitment related things. I worked there for about a year and a half, and then I made the transition to working at Musician, which is a Finnish startup here as well, a music education startup. And basically from there, I was hired at Zalando in what we called a sourcing role. Sourcing for us in talent acquisition is basically headhunting. And then from there, I joined Swappy earlier this year as well. So definitely, have kind of transitioned more into the talent acquisition side of things other than the HR. But maybe what I can do now is tell you a bit more about the things we're building at Swappy. So at the moment, we hire in three main areas at Swappy. So we hire your pretty standard kind of business-related roles, marketing, finance, HR, sales, etc. We also hire customer service. Per country, we are currently operational in Finland, Sweden, Italy, and Denmark. And for each of those markets, we hire country-specific marketing who speaks the country's language in addition to customer service. We also have physical stores here in Finland in Ruoholahti and Iso Omena. And then we also hire a breadth of different operations folks to help us with the phone refurbishment. So if you aren't aware, Swappy is also a Finnish startup. We're basically creating an end-to-end marketplace for buying and selling used smartphones. So the operations part of our business is the biggest part for us, and we currently have around 140 operations team members with us as well. So if we look at the current status of these things, you can see all of our open jobs on our job page. For us, we post things as they open, but basically at Swappy, we don't require Finnish. This is something that is useful for some of our roles, like our customer service roles. There are some finance roles where you need to work with the local tax legislation and things like that. But overall, I would say the language-specific roles that we hire for are mostly in customer service and marketing. For our salaried employees or our salaried roles, at the moment, we are focused on senior profiles, but this is mostly because as a startup, we do need to put in place the structures that will allow us to continue to grow and also to support other junior talent as well. And then in terms of operations as well, so we have the number of roles that we hire for in this area really depends on our orders and sales projections, among other things. But for these roles, we don't require any prior experience. We teach you how to refurbish phones and basically learn the whole process. And I would say here as well, we do have an interesting approach compared to a lot of other businesses in that we have kind of three main areas. But I would say as well with our operations team, we're really open to hiring people from within as well over time. We have pretty clearly laid out hiring plans for the year, but for us, as we continue to grow and open other types of roles, it may be that people on our operations side of our business are able to transition into other roles within the company. So I would also say for us, we are pretty international as well, that we have over 27 different nationalities as part of the company, and this is something that will continue to change as time goes on. I would also like to note that our hiring needs change over the course of the year. We do our best to kind of plan these things in advance, but there are always different things that happen. And I would say even for big companies, this is the case. But basically for us, we do our best to post these things externally as well. So I would say the best source of information for our open roles is our job site or LinkedIn as well. Then if we move to talking a bit more about startups versus large companies. So I've worked mostly at startups, but then I also work at Zalando, which is currently employs over 16,000 people. So that's definitely a large company in my experience. I would say, when you're thinking about what type of environment you would really like to work in, startups and large companies both have positives and negatives. And I would say these are really up to you and what you're really looking for. So if we look into some of the different things about working at startups and large companies, startups have fewer management layers, whereas in bigger companies, there are a lot of different layers of responsibility and decision making that you need to go through to get something approved. For us, we have a pretty flat organization, at least in terms of the number of management layers we have. We also have more flexible processes in terms of pretty much everything with regards to company practices and policies. For instance, in the face of coronavirus, we've been able to move almost fully to remote work for all of our team members. So there are a few still working in the office, but for the most part, we've been able to transition very seamlessly to this new way of working for the time being. We also have more flexible hiring practices. So I would say this is really dependent upon the company need and also the team. We do our best to balance out our team when making hiring decisions. So it isn't only about your technical qualifications, but then also soft skills like communication skills. And if you bring anything else to the table that we might not have even known that we were looking for, say if you're a marketing professional who can also do a lot of video editing or something like that, that's something that we could potentially use and utilize, even if it's not necessarily outlined in the job description, but could be a nice to have. I will say as well, startups are higher risk. Not all startups are profitable, so that is something you need to consider before joining one. We also have an evolving company culture, but we don't have a clearly defined company culture like places like Kone and F-Secure that has been kind of working at crafting this company culture over time. And also at startups, we have limited benefits. So that's something that I would like to be very realistic about in terms of when we talk to candidates and things like that. So it's not going to be anything like below a living wage or anything like that. But a lot of other bigger companies offer a lot of things in addition to salary that they're very attractive to potential applicants. Large companies, on the other hand, they have a defined company structure. This can be very beneficial, especially if you're thinking of your career path and what you want that to look like. For us, like we are still kind of creating this over time. So if you're looking for a very clearly defined career path, a larger company might be something that you want to consider. Also, they tend to have a more clearly defined process. Carolina mentioned that she has processed 400 to 500 applications over time as a hiring manager. For us, our hiring managers are often involved, but it really depends on the role, and it's kind of handled on a case-by-case basis. I would say large companies also have more forecasted roles and hiring plans. I've done my best to create this for Swappy, but like I mentioned, it will change over time. Large companies also provide more stability, and they have a more robust compensation and benefits offering. I would also say here, one differentiator between startups and large companies is our hiring process. So whereas a lot of typical or more traditional or larger companies here in Finland do have things like a position closing date or a phone number that you can call, this is not something that we do. Instead, we accept applications on a rolling basis, and do our best to kind of move through applications as they come in. I receive anywhere from a couple hundred to 1,000 applications per month, so I have a lot of work sifting through applications. So I would also say kind of hammering home the point of making sure your CV and your cover letter are concise, clear, easy to read. If you use company colors, like great, but I also would like to see a bit of your personality as well. Like tell me who you are as a person. I find that sometimes applicants tend to try to, sterilize their application because they're afraid that like having experience from a different background wouldn't be interesting or relevant for us. But as I mentioned, it can be very interesting and relevant depending on what that experience is. So highlight it. It's what you have to work with. I've also noticed a bunch of things happening, in this chat today here. And I'll be honest, if we have two people who've applied for a role and someone has more experience or specific skills, like say you're applying for some sort of product analyst role, and we have an applicant who has 2 to 3 years of product analyst experience, that's going to be something that our hiring managers are really going to want to speak with that person. Whereas if you're transitioning from a different area, it might be, more difficult to get you into that interview just because we have other applicants. So I would say a lot of it is kind of unfair, and it's part of navigating the job market as it is. But we also need to kind of basically balance the business need with our inbound applicants as well. I should also note here that we do a lot of sourcing for our own candidates, so I would consider this like headhunting and things like that. So make sure that you check your LinkedIn messages, make sure that your LinkedIn is up to date. So if we move into the tips, so again, hammering home some of these points. So make sure it's clean, your CV is clean, easy to read, and showcases stretches of time. I find sometimes that like people reorder things in a way that is kind of confusing. I would always keep it in kind of a timeline format, but also make sure that you highlight those relevant experiences, which you can also do in a brief summary or things like that. For me personally, I think photos are optional. I find that they also bias recruitment experiences for people as well. So I'm never going to mark it against anyone if they do not include a photo. Similarly, I've seen people who include things like marital status, the number of children that they have and their children's names. And this is a lot of information that we simply don't need in order to make an informed hiring decision. I've also seen a lot of people put their education first at the top of their CV. I would say this is more relevant if you are looking for a research-related role. If you have moved to Finland and haven't worked here but have studied for 2 or 3 years, then it might be relevant then. But I would always kind of lead with your relevant job experience. And then if we move on to LinkedIn, I'll be honest, my LinkedIn isn't perfect, but I think the biggest points here are to make sure it's clean, easy to read, list skills to increase your chances of appearing in searches. So as I mentioned, like I do a lot of sourcing for my candidates. So by putting relevant skills and things that you've worked on in your profile, then they show up in a search for me. Because basically most recruiters have an add-on at LinkedIn. So we can actually search a lot of the fields that you have on your profile. And this is something that we find is increasingly important. And a lot of recruiters that I know do use LinkedIn most in terms of their tools. And my kind of advice here is also to make sure you have a clear photo. If you do have a photo here, and also highlight your experience and your personality once again. And it could be, that you revamp this per role that you apply for. I don't think that's necessary, but instead I would just make sure that if you are updating your LinkedIn, make sure that you also update your CV so that they at least kind of mirror each other to an extent. Some other tips as well, in terms of writing a cover letter, I do read them. I find them useful. There are certain roles where, if I'm hiring software engineers, they often don't provide a cover letter. Again, the reality of the situation here is that, roles in tech and specifically software engineering are really high demand in this market and across the world at the moment. So they can kind of get away without, necessarily sending an in-depth cover letter. However, I will always appreciate it, especially if it's something that showcases who you are and you tell me why you actually want this job, rather than that you need a job, right? Some other tips for cover letters as well, if you go to the next slide, Saku. Also make sure that you articulate what it is you're actually looking for. Like if you are looking to transition from one field to another, say that. If you do have a gap in your resume, you can highlight some things about that here. I would also recommend that you tailor the cover letter to the job description. So oftentimes in job descriptions, we mention keywords that I'm also using to search for profiles on LinkedIn. So if you replicate some of those, that can be useful for helping me understand the experience that you have that's relevant for us. However, don't just like copy and paste the whole job description. Showcase your own kind of experience there as well. And I would say sometimes as well, like you don't always need to submit this as a separate document, but you can submit it in the text field. A lot of applications these days allow you to do that. So it kind of cuts down the work that you would need to do otherwise. If we move to the next slide, so there are also various job boards. So I would recommend keeping your eye on these, checking them often. The Hub is a great one for learning about other startups. Even if some of these places don't have open jobs, it's probably because they don't have anyone on board who's able to manage the jobs at the moment. Because startups often have very limited resources. So sometimes even if you do apply for a job, it can be helpful to send an email to someone who works at the company. Also, some other ones that have been mentioned, Duunitori is a big one. You could also check Oikotie, but that's a paid board that is a bit more expensive for startup companies. And then also themed boards like gamesjobs.fi. Jobs in Helsinki is a jobs aggregator. It basically pulls jobs from other job boards into one main hub. And then, of course, LinkedIn. We post all of our jobs on LinkedIn. So I think that's also an accurate place to stay up to date about jobs. And then if you don't see a relevant role and you think you'd be a fit for the company or for a similar role, then reach out to someone at the company. I say this now, don't blanket everyone at the company. I would send one message, and the worst thing that's going to happen is that someone's going to tell you no, or that they don't have any opportunities at the moment based on their current recruitment needs. But you could also reach out to CEOs or managers in smaller companies. If nothing else, you could reach out to other people on LinkedIn or elsewhere that have the type of job you would like to have. You can ask them questions about how they got there, especially if they don't have a very traditional background as well. For me, honestly, since I sent so many applications, the best thing was really just being diligent and persistent and following up. And then if there is an open application, feel free to submit one there. We currently don't have one because I do not have time to go through the open application folder, since I do have clearly defined roles that I'm hiring for. So if a company doesn't have one, it's not that they don't want to receive your application, but rather that they already have clearly defined roles that they're looking for and looking to hire for. Some other tips, like I mentioned, be persistent, be diligent, follow up on emails and messages that you've sent. Sometimes that might take a couple, people are busy, and I would say more times than not, it's not that they don't plan on responding, but maybe it got kind of buried in an inbox or something like that. Reach out to other people who may have insights into your field, even if it's not someone on LinkedIn, but if you see someone at an event. Also attend meetups and events. I think this is a great way to kind of build that network of people. And I would say as well, if you're able to find a mentor or mentorship program, like that's a great way to meet new people. Unfortunately, the program that I did doesn't exist anymore, but it was organized by the city. But I met a lot of people from other industries that I wouldn't have otherwise met. And also be patient. It does require a big time spend, but it's definitely worth it. And then maybe a last kind of tip page for job seekers. It is not easy to find a job in Finland if you're international talent or if you're a junior talent as well. For us, like junior talent is something that we see as someone who maybe isn't young per se, but doesn't have very much experience in the field. But being an international talent as well, it's gotten a lot easier here. It's still not the easiest, I would say, compared to if you were applying for a job in your home country. But once you kind of learn how to navigate it, it can be okay. Consider exploring a new area or leveraging existing skills in a new way. I've seen some people commenting about this here today as well. It's really about how you brand yourself. So if you are, say, someone who has worked in marketing, but you're looking to make the move into some sort of software engineering role, say it. Let us know that you are thinking about kind of what your next step is in your role. I will never ask you about your 5-year plan. I don't even know what my 5-year plan is at this point, but definitely have an idea of like what it is that you're actually working toward. Also look for freelance or consulting opportunities to keep your skills sharp. These don't have to be in Finland either. There are jobs or there are websites like Upwork where you can try your hand at, if it's copywriting, you can probably find some language specific copywriting things there. You might also be able to try some other skill sets like data entry or other things like that. It could be that companies here as well might need support in some of these areas, but aren't able to actually hire an employee due to the cost or the time to spend. And also, again, be patient. It's going to take time, but I think over time you'll see the dividends from doing so as well. And then if we move to some closing thoughts. So again, finding a job and changing careers can be a numbers game. Don't give up. I honestly got my first job in recruiting because the timing was right for the company. The timing was right for me. I was able to make a move. So sometimes you just have to find people at the right time. And that's also why I would recommend really exploring startups, because we are a bit more flexible than other companies as well. Don't be afraid to ask questions and reach out to people who might be able to help you. Also try new things. If you want to learn a new skill set, seek out an online course. Or ask other people for advice about how they kind of worked on increasing their skills. Set realistic expectations, but also aim for the sky. You're probably not going to be a CEO in 5 years. I don't think that that's very likely for most of us. But if your expectation is that you will find a job, then you probably will find one. If your aim is that you will become a head of marketing or something at a company, then work on that. Try and find ways to kind of build that skill set. And lastly, it's never too late for a career move. I think we all see over time that our careers are constantly changing. The job market isn't what it was 5 years ago and isn't what it will be in 5 years from now. So basically, just be flexible, be open, but also kind of stay true to yourself. Yeah, that's about all that I have. But if there are any questions or anything else, I'm happy to take them as well. Oh, and you can also follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn and shoot me an email. And I should also mention we're going to be opening a production specialist role today as well. So we should have another open role if you're looking for something either short term or long term that doesn't require any experience. Thank you, everyone.
Bear with me a second. Let's see if we can go through a few of the questions that you have presented.
Good, thanks, Austin. So I think that we are not able to still get Saku from the audio because he's ensuring that on the YouTube it works fine. But I think there is some questions that perhaps some of us can address. I'm trying to already answer one actually from the YouTube now, but I've got windows popping up everywhere, so I'm trying to do this. There was one question I think that maybe I could answer, and then Anna can complete. There was a question concerning that bigger corporations are dragging the recruitment process for a long time, months, quarters, years. What candidate can do to speed up the decision process and not in a negative way? Well, like I said, I mean, I've been 6 months in the recruiting process to get to Kone, which was long for sure. I think generally speaking, we're trying to make an effort to make it shorter these days, but we still have these cases where it can drag along. I'm sorry to say, but I'm not sure there is actually anything as a candidate that you can really do. Usually, if company is dragging it along, it's because there is some kind of reasons. And trust me, us hiring managers, we are usually trying to speed things up. If you have somebody to replace, you don't want to have that job empty for 6 months. So there's usually like other external forces or some kind of reasons why we can't move it along. The thing is that usually we can't say it to the applicant, so it gets very frustrating. But I'm not sure really if as a candidate you can do much for that. I don't know, Anna, if you have a view on this.
Yes, I mean, in our organization specifically, the recruitment processes are quite fast, and this is a feedback that I received from people who finally joined. But this is not like that in all the cases. Sometimes they get delayed for questions that are out of our control. Like for instance, now with Corona, so we waited for a few weeks to see what we were gonna do, and finally we communicated to those that are gonna start in the company that it was postponed, and then we of course informed the ones that were not selected about that. And we have a question on the chat about asking for feedback. Sorry, I cannot reply back and with the to your specific name, so I will answer here. It's always good to ask for feedback, and you can find the name or the last name of the contact person in the directory. And actually, if you are in a position in which you ask for feedback and they don't reply, I wonder if this is a person you would like to work with. So it's good testing. And sometimes I discovered that when people call back and ask for feedback, then even the hiring manager found out things that he or she didn't know. So it's good to have the conversation up and running. And about being above 25, an international young applicant, I always say be brave, apply. I mean, the no is there, so don't say the no's to yourself. We have a case in the company of someone who was a professional musician and suddenly decided to start a career in IT. So he's not definitely a junior person, and he started in one of our entry positions. So yes, of course, you can be of course, young talent, maybe a junior talent.
But maybe I can also respond to this question of time as well for that a job is kept open. Like for instance, here at Swampy, there were a few roles that existed here that had been open for a couple of months. And it was partly due to the fact that they didn't have anyone dedicated to kind of going through applicants and things before I joined. So I would say sometimes it's also like an organization's limitations as well. And I would say we are not, we're not planning on doing that anymore as far as things are are concerned, and it is often things that that are out of the company's control. I would say that sometimes sending an email can be helpful, but I do my best at least to follow up with my candidates as much as possible.
We have also a question about if it's easier to get.
And kind of responding to Pierre Alban's question about programming, I think I'm an example of someone who hasn't studied programming and doesn't really plan on studying programming. And as I am a foreigner, I think that there are other types of roles. I would say, if you're trying to work in marketing or other things that do require language very heavily, then that's something that I would suggest really having to think about. Like, working for marketing for a Finnish company is going to be difficult. And it isn't even necessarily that you need to be fluent, but you need to understand kind of the cultural context of language, at least in my experience when hiring marketers. But there are other ways that you could approach marketing as well, like performance marketing is becoming increasingly important. So knowing things like how to use like Google Analytics or Facebook marketing and analytics and things like that, I think is increasingly relevant. I don't know if Carl or Anna want to respond to that question, or one of the others as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Anna. Go ahead.
Yeah. There was one very interesting question about if companies offer relocation packages for trainees. And actually, this is not on the industry standard. I've never seen a company offering a relocation package for trainees, basically because relocation is highly expensive. And what we are focusing here is, for instance, candidates that are already in the market. And unfortunately, we application for young graduates for other countries or even out of the European Union. And for those, it's impossible that we can offer a position because basically location is so expensive and the immigration process are so lengthy that we cannot go through that for all the positions. So we need to clearly identify in which ones we can afford put the money and time for this.
Yeah, I agree with Anna on this one. I think that realistically speaking, like, we have such an amazing talent pool in Finland already that I have to say that we are probably not getting too much out of our ways to get people from outside the country when it comes to international talent. And a little bit coming back also to Sida Mashana, there's a question on this. So who was asking if it's then unfair that for the people who don't have the residence permit, that the recruitment processes are so long. So in that sense, like, for us, I don't really think it's an option. We are probably favoring international talents who are already in Finland, and God knows there is enough of those around in all the fields. So I think that's one thing. And I just want to quickly come back about one of the comments that I made, because I saw that it prompted a lot of feedback concerning the colors of the CV. So I'm not saying that, for the record, I'm not saying at Kone that we are selecting people based on the colors they are using in their CV. So let's maybe not misinterpret that too much. But I'm just saying that when you've got 120 CVs, or 40 or 50 or whichever is the number, but in one case 120, and all the candidates, they're already in Finland, they already have residence permit, most of them have master's degree from a good university, they have some type of relevant working experience, they have the language skills that we require because we're working internationally everywhere, so every language is relevant. It becomes very difficult then to make the choice, and we can't afford as hiring managers to interview 120 people. So we've got to make cuts, and of course we make cuts like based on the CVs and stuff, but I'm just saying that, and most importantly the cover letters, which I must reassure you are 90% of the time terrible, that it does pop out. When you have someone where you think, okay, that person has gone a little bit extra effort, then that's my thinking, at least as a hiring manager, that I'm like, okay, that person has gone the extra mile, they've done something extra. And of course, that sort of like teases my interest, but I'm not saying we're recruiting people based on paper colors. No, that's for sure. To be clear.
Okay, this is Sana. There is a question about, would you agree that programming is then the best bet for a foreigner with not enough Finnish to be fluent? I think the same person asks if 18 months is enough to speak fluent. I can reply, I've been 8 years in Finland, studied to the B2 level, and I'm still very clumsy speaking the language. So 18 months, I mean, you're a hero if you can reach that, but I know people are able to do that. And programming as a best bet for a foreigner. Of course, those roles, as I mentioned, in which English is not required, are a best bet. Programming or R&D roles are one of them, but in any organization, there can be chances. As I said, I don't speak fluent Finnish and I work in human resources. One may think that, okay, for human resources, you really need to speak the local language, but that's not the reality on international organizations. So it depends on the scope of the company and the scope of the role.
And maybe I can open up about the cover letter question, because I have to say that I find them, generally speaking, shockingly bad. I'm sorry to be blunt, but the purpose for today is to try to help you guys to get jobs, so I prefer to give a bit of tough love than try to hide it. So 90%, if not more, of the cover letters, at least that I'm getting, are copy-paste cover letters, so they are not customized at all. Sometimes you even get the "Dear Sir, I'm so happy to apply to Canon," and it's like, well, actually it's Madame and I'm in Kone, not Canon. So these happen, but also because it's 90% of the time it's just repeating what's already in the CV, and it's about what I've done, what I've accomplished, what I have learned, what knowledges I've acquired, and things like that. And I think we need to make big distinctions between the CVs. So CVs tend to be laundry list with no explanation, and then the cover letter tried to explain the CV. And I think these two documents, they should have really totally different purpose. So in the CV, it is okay to say what you have done, what you have learned, even more so in your LinkedIn profile if you can. But in the cover letter, it really has to be a story. It has to be about why you want to be employed in that company, and why at the end of reading that letter, I want to employ you in that company. And quite frankly, I mean, Anna and Austin can comment because they get way more CVs than I do. But as a hiring manager, I want to, vibrate a little bit. I want to have this kind of tingling sensation when I'm reading the cover letter that, okay, that person really is passionate about our company. They are the right fit. And sometimes I've been selecting even people who didn't necessarily have the right experience, and I'm going to be perhaps called for that as well, but they really genuinely had an interest in the company. And you have to find that connection. You have to find that link.
Yes, and this is Anna. To add to that, as I said also in my presentation, Be Yourself, and how I did my own cover letters and CV, I just Googled excellent examples, and then you can find the ones that really resonates more with you, and try to then, when you apply, look at the company. What is important in this company, and somehow reflect that in the subliminal message you have there. I know it's not easy, but as I said also, looking for a job is a job, so you need to put a lot of effort on that. We have to be blunt. As foreigners, we have more difficulties because we don't speak the language, and that language is very important.
I would third all of the things that have been said here.
We cannot hear you. Or just
you can't hear me. Okay.
Not sure if it's just me though. Okay. Maybe Austin, you need to reconnect somehow.
Could be. Can you hear me now?
No, all good now. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I switched headphones. I have a couple pairs here just in case. So I would say for me, even if someone doesn't have like experience that clearly aligns with what we're looking for, as long as it's kind of close, and then I can also get, like you mentioned, both of you, that you get a good sense of who the person is. Even if we don't have a job open right now, it could be that we're able to leverage that later on. Like I mentioned, we have a hiring plan, and right now we're hiring mostly senior talent for our salaried employees roles, but we do have junior talents budgeted for later on in the year. So if someone basically kind of includes a memorable application that really showcases who they are and what they're aiming to do, then what I often do with candidates is I say, we don't have a fit right now. I try to save everyone's time in that sense, because I also know deeply what my hiring managers are looking for. But then instead, what I would do is kind of make a note and check in with that person later on in the year once I have more clarity about our hiring plan, or when I'm able to actually open the role. So there might be other companies that do things like this as well. I know a lot of companies are also working to kind of create this passive talent pool that they can pull from once a situation changes or they open a new role. So over time, I think we'll see that this becomes more sophisticated as well. There are a lot of tools that are being developed right now to kind of manage some of these things. But I would say, really like just kind of hammering home the point, like make your CV and cover letter memorable and also relevant. Those are the 2 points that I would say in addition.
Yes, I fully agree with your comments. And what I would finalize is saying the CV is a picture of the past, but it should reflect what you are able to do in the future. And that's why we mean about personalizing, about making something memorable. So when someone reads, it's just, okay, this is what this person has been able to do. And this shows that this person has these other capabilities and can't be also through personal stuff you have in your CV. So always remember that.
And then there's a question about open applications, and I'm afraid that I don't have much experience on those. So I don't know if Anna or Austin could maybe tell a bit more about. I mean, I have experience, but from 15 years ago, so it's not relevant anymore. But maybe Anna and Austin can tell if they get good open applications or what they expect from open applications.
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, we currently do not accept open applications. I mean, if you send us an email or something like that, I'll probably kind of echo that, but I might be able to give you some advice as well. I would say other people are probably open to that as well. I find that typically companies that have open applications aren't great at managing them because it does take a considerable amount of time to go through and really see if there's a fit for what the needs are in the organization. I would also kind of hammer home this point that we are limited by the needs of the organization. As much as we would love to hire people with diverse skill sets for other interesting roles that maybe we will need later on, we're kind of limited to the current status. I don't know if you have other experience from F-Secure in this area.
Well, F-Secure is slightly different. As I mentioned, we HR people are involved in the recruitment processes at the very end. So it's the hiring managers who does all the filterings, and when someone is sending an open application, we forward that to the manager. So I don't see the value of open applications unless there is a specific need or someone has referred you to that position because they may have a new role or whatever, but we don't have a solid system to manage open applications. So I cannot provide more insights here.
I also noticed that there was one question as well about when jobs are posted on LinkedIn, if they're deleted once the jobs are filled. So kind of in terms of the technical things that happen in the background for us, like when, at least for our recruiting system that we use, once we take a role down from our jobs page, it will also be taken down from other job boards as well. Sometimes there might be a day or two where there's a delay, but in general, this is how most companies work. And I think that's, maybe we can hand it over to Saku from here to kind of close things off.
Yes.
Perfect. It's been a pleasure. Many thank you for everyone.
Saku, we can't hear you.
Many thanks for joining in. And for the last word, I would love to highlight the one question there was about how to write an open application. And really, when it comes to the open application, it boils down to the question of your story, I think, and you're really coming up with your own story concisely, and how you can sort of then link your story with the company. And I think I would, when it comes to open applications, when I've sent an open application, I think it's all about trying to sort of stand out. So sometime in the past, I've written the whole open application in yellow on a yellow Word document, because the company uses yellow, just to kind of like highlight a little bit, echoing Caro's words on the importance of trying to kind of like stand up and demonstrate your sort of a skillful take of design and understanding how it's important to look smart and all the rest of it. And coming up with your story very concisely, not blathering around, maybe highlighting something from your past that gives it a unique feel, because at the end of the day, the open application is always something that hasn't been invited per se, and if you can somehow connect that open application with a way of communicating with the hiring manager or the recruiter, and say sending the open application first and then following a couple of days later, I think it always makes a real difference, because otherwise it will be yet another open application that might not be looked at at all, because as mentioned, the numbers of open applications can run in hundreds and even thousands for larger companies. This has been a real learning experience. I think I haven't come across with a single meeting where there hasn't been some sort of a technical glitch of a kind, but I think this is one of the rare ones that we've managed to strike through most of the technical glitches available. I'm very pleased to have had you and Kirsi. Thank you for your help. Thank you, Caro, Anna and Austin, for joining in. It's been a real pleasure, even though I must admit it's been a little bit nerve-cracking. I think I'll reflect on this experience of this the steep learning curve on LinkedIn fairly soon. Many thanks for joining in. Have a great rest of the week, and do connect with me also on LinkedIn, and highlight any questions. If you come across with any, we'll try and come up with a new one fairly soon, a new webinar, and we'll need to figure out what sort of a theme might be a particularly good one. Many thanks. Bye bye.